It's obvious we need to rein in government spending, all the inefficiencies that are in both our federal and state governments. So what's the best way to actually go about accomplishing that? Is it something like DOGE, Departments of Government Efficiencies Everywhere? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by the best heart health supplement in the world, Cardio Miracle. So if you're looking to go ahead and lower your resting heart rate, lower your blood pressure while improving your pump at the gym, stick around. We'll talk about that later in today's episode. Or if you're watching today's episode, go ahead and scan that little QR code over my shoulder, or simply head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS, and you'll see a little note saying you're shopping with Brian Nichols. But let's go ahead and jump into the topic of today's conversation. The DOGE conversation. Yes, the Department of Government Efficiency, go back to January and February of 2025, and that was leading the headlines. Elon Musk was working hand in hand with Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, going through and starting to open up the books. Let's peel back layers of the onion and dig into the deep state. Where is all of the funding going into these black books? Can we start trying to trim the fat? And we found we actually could, but that was not met with any resistance, right? Oops, maybe there was. And also we discovered a lot of nefarious areas where supposed good funding was going, not funding some not so, or rather funding some not so good causes. So let's go ahead and dig into all that and more to discuss DOGE and the implications both from a federal, state, and local perspective. Brandon Prichard is joining us here on the show. Brandon, welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. How you doing?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, Brian. I really appreciate you.
For sure, man. Looking forward to today's conversation. And obviously, you've been boots on the ground up in North Dakota, fighting the good fight. You served as an elected official up in North Dakota. You talked about DOGE from a state level, taking inspiration from a federal perspective. But we're going to dig into that and more. First, do us a favor. Introduce yourself here to the Brian Nichols Show audience and talk about a little bit of your history up in North Dakota politics.
Certainly. And again, thank you. My name is Brian Prichard. I served as a state representative in North Dakota, representing a district in central as well as south central North Dakota, down to the South Dakota border. Bismarck area is where I am from. Represented from 2022 to 2024, served on the House Health and Human Services Committee and the Agriculture Committee. I used to call those the bureaucracy committees because there was always so much bureaucracy associated with those two areas of governance. In 2023, after the legislative session in our state, I was so frustrated because we have so many Republicans in our state, but none of them vote right. I mean, it's a very small minority of Republicans who would join me in standing up to fiscal waste on the social issues, whatever you name it. Just very few that would join me. So I reached out to a guy named Cliff Maloney, who founded Citizens Alliance of America. And we got a chapter of Citizens Alliance in North Dakota started. And again, I'm in complete control of what's done here, but Cliff is a wonderful asset to us and helps us raise funds and different things. And so we went out, we helped increase the numbers. When I was in the legislature, there was 17% of the state house in North Dakota that were conservative. We're now up to 25%, which is our first goal, getting a quarter of the state house on our side. And then the Senate was probably about 8%. And now it's 17%. And that's just through one cycle. That's through replacing vacancies. And we're going to keep increasing those numbers to get good folks elected in the state of North Dakota. And then finally, just to mention, I'm a law student. I study at the University of North Dakota's Law School. And I am a proud Christian. I'm married to my wife, Katie. And then I have one little guy and then one on the way as well. So that's a little bit about me.
Congratulations, man. Yeah, being a dad is one of the most fun things. I think it's been really exciting for me because most of my audience, I hope, is aware that I'm a dad. And this has been a new adventure for me over the past 3 years, going through, the whole, being just a podcast host, business guy, sales executive, husband, and now adding the dad moniker to my title. It's been an adventure, and what an amazing adventure it is.
Best addition to your, I guess you could say, your resume that you could ever ask for. It really is.
Man. Oh man, it's actually funny. Like I was just talking about this the other day and how fast it goes too, right? Like one of my partners I work with in the sales world, he was asking, because we haven't talked in a little bit. He goes, "How's your baby doing?" I'm like, "Mark, she's not a baby anymore. She's like, playing soccer over at the Y. What the heck happened there?" But you blink and you miss it. But no, I'm really excited to have you on, Brandon, because I mean, you mentioned actually going out and making a difference, right? And this is something that a lot of folks and just to set the stage here, I think most folks just feel burnt out, but also powerless in many instances. Because you look at how big these leviathans of government programs or institutions are, and it feels like you're fighting the steepest of uphill battles. Yeah. And we look at how we face such resistance, and it feels like it's a natural resistance. It feels like we go out to a state capitol, or we're going to protest in Washington, or what have you, and it always felt like, and still does to an extent feel like, we were met with organized resistance that just came out of nowhere. And as Elon Musk takes over DOGE back in the beginning of 2025, and we start peeling back layers of the onion, as I mentioned in my intro, we started to see that maybe these resistance groups, these organized protest efforts, weren't as natural, weren't as organic as they were presented. And if in many cases, we're actually funded by the various tax dollars are supposed to be going out and helping disenfranchised folks or helping people who are actually in need. This money's actually just being funneled to these left-wing cause organizations. And I think this opened up a lot of folks' eyes, specifically in the more, obviously in the right-hand side of the political aisle, but also looking at folks who they were very non-political. They just they were just around, right? Like it's your business owners of the world. It's your average folks in the world who just kind of go along to get along. And they start to see like, oh, my tax dollars aren't going to helping people who actually need it. And it's being used to buy big pallets of bricks to throw at people during protests. What? So let's talk about DOGE, because there's been a lot of misinformation around DOGE from both sides. I hear it in the political right saying DOGE is the perfect solution to all of our problems, both from a federal perspective, but also going into the state and local areas. However, it's still facing uphill battles because the leftists are fighting back. On the left-hand side of the political aisle, I hear folks saying it's a threat to democracy because we're going after these poor interest groups and they're no longer getting their voices heard, and it's hurting DEI, it's hurting ESG. Well, yeah, it probably is, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But Brandon, kind of give us your perspective, because you've worked on these kind of issues from an actual policy perspective. Just help folks who are listening today understand first the problem. Like, why is it that we're having a conversation where DOGE is even necessary to start the conversation versus, we're actually using money and resources in an efficient type of manner from a government perspective? So just help us get a little bit more context there.
Certainly. I think that, there is a difference between what goes on. And I say a difference, it's kind of a nuanced difference, but it's important to highlight a difference between what goes on in Washington, D.C. versus what goes on at the state level. You hope the state level is more responsible, but, sometimes it's not. I would argue in our state, it's not oftentimes. But here's the difference. In Washington, D.C., you have a full-time legislature, a full-time, United States Congress, and then you have the executive branch. When Congress passes a spending bill, they give, a block sum of money to a government agency. Congress doesn't have time. They're a full-time legislature. They don't have the time to really put those checks and balances. Yeah, they can investigate. Yeah, they can put some strings attached. But to really know how that taxpayer money is then, being utilized by the government agencies is very difficult to pin down unless you have something like a government efficiency program, which digs into it, which audits, which finds the misspending and kind of points it out. And so that hopefully legislation can be drafted in a better way. And on the federal level. Now, on the state level, and I'm speaking as a North Dakotan, we have a biennium that we only meet one time out of every 2 years. There are a few states around the country that are full-time, but most are not. Vast majority of states are not full-time. The problem here, I don't think, is as much of busyness and overload. It's just a matter of we don't understand how the agencies work as a legislature. And I say that, I know a lot of legislators who are very intelligent and have been there for a very, very long time, probably too long, and they still don't get the inner workings of the, say, the Department of Health and Human Services or the Commerce Department.
And by the way, that's not for a lack of them trying to dig. It's probably just because there are so many different layers. There are so many intricacies of these like organizations entangling together. It just makes it almost impossible to unwind all that. You know, it's like here you go. Here's a perfect example. It's the movie Christmas Vacation when Chevy Chase is getting ready to get all the lights put up on the house, and he goes, "Here you go, Russ." Oh, small knot, and he pulls out the big ball of mangled up Christmas lights, and they're in that ginormous ball. Like tiny little knot. That's what it feels like with some of these government agencies.
That's not far off. You know, and on the state level, it just seems that there's information overload. A lot of, you know, the problem on the state level is that we don't have, you know, some states have really good staff. You know, we don't have any staff in North Dakota. We don't get a staffer. We don't get an office even. Our office is our desk that sits in the state capitol building. So, I mean, that's kind of different based upon state. But
picture this. You wake up one day and the government has frozen your bank account. Your money? Gone. Sounds crazy, I know. Ask people in Argentina or even Canada how real that can be. And that's why you absolutely need to check out the Expat Money Online Summit, October 10th through October 12th. And it's hosted by my good buddy, Mikkel Thorup. It's a free online event packed with experts teaching all about how to protect your wealth, secure a second residency, slash your taxes, and buy property abroad. And this year's spotlight is on Latin America. So Argentina, El Salvador, Panama, Paraguay, places opening doors right now for people smart enough to walk through. And by the way, your free ticket is waiting at expatmoneysummit.com. And if you want VIP access with replays and exclusive panels, use promo code TBNS for 20% off your upgrade. One more time, that's expatmoneysummit.com, promo code TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show.
It definitely is a matter of there aren't enough people for legislators to be able to dig into every single intricacy of how the budget works and how agency heads operate. So this is all to say that DOGE is kind of that, you know, that say closing the gap between the legislature and the executive agency heads to try and understand what the executive agencies are spending their money on, how efficient they are at spending it. So it's very important that you have that gap filler. And that's why, you know, even before you know, Elon and Trump came out as supportive of a DOGE. Obviously, I wouldn't have called it that, but I always thought there had to be something. In our state, we had a legislative and audit fiscal review committee, which tried to fill that gap. It kind of did, but it wasn't perfect. And so having another set of eyes on it, I was very supportive. And one last thing here, Brian, this goes into the problem that I tried to highlight in the Blaze article, is I think that DOGE, or a task force on government efficiency is what we call it in our state, that is the right approach. That is the correct approach. The problem that I'm trying to identify is that in red states, in Republican states, we have a problem with the legislative management dedicating the biggest spenders to be on that committee, essentially watering down and making it completely null and void. And my whole point of writing this article is, let's pinpoint the legislative management members. Let's pinpoint in some states, you know, I think it's the governor that has a say on it. But usually it's a task force dedicated by legislators. But let's find the root of the problem, which is legislative management's occasionally governor input. Do not pick the best people to be on these committees. And in our state, we only have, I count, it's 2 people. We have 2 people out of, I think, 14 or 15 members of that committee who I would call conservatives who actually try and cut spending. And by the way, the most liberal Democrat in the state legislature, Kathy Hogan, nice lady, but very, very liberal, is on the department of the DOGE committee in our state. Why are we appointing the most liberal Democrat to be on a committee to cut waste and spending? I don't get it. So that's the problem that I'm trying to identify.
Well, yeah, man, and this is the part that makes it really difficult, because you see how bad the problem is, right? And just how there are so many layers. I keep on going. I feel like Shrek today. I keep on going back to the layers of the onion, right? But like there are so many layers to this onion, and it's the beauty of our system, but also it's the headache of our system, because it's like it's hurting cats. It feels like in many instances. So you look at that, and then there's real pain that comes to this right now, right? And I mean, just let's go back to the federal perspective. We're at $37, $38 trillion in debt, which this just blows my mind, Brandon, because I think back to when I worked on a congressional campaign in 2012. And I mean, this is right at the tail end of the Tea Party revolution, right? And we were pissing and moaning about $12 trillion in debt. And that was not even, 15 years ago? That's 13 years ago. And just to see that we've not only doubled that, we've almost tripled it. We did triple it. Oh my Lord. That is mind-boggling to me to think that we've gotten that, like, just the rails are, what's the expression? The skis are off the rails or whatever it is. That's how far we've gotten away from just the overarching ethos of fiscal responsibility. And man, like, I hear you about having Ms. Hogan up there being the liberal goofball who's on the DOGE committee. Like, what? But then at the same point in time, Republicans aren't doing too hot either. A lot of these issues, if we go back to, our increase in defense spending coupled with the massive increases in social spending, I mean, it really manifests there in the early 2000s. You have 9/11 happen, and all of a sudden you have the war on terror. $1-2 trillion spent on that overseas. The Pentagon, September 10th, 2001, saying, we don't know where $1 trillion went. Oops. That's a big question mark. And that, again, opens a bunch of other questions like, wait, what happened to Building 7? Where did the airplane hit the Pentagon? Oh, let's not.
You're asking too many questions.
Too many questions. I'm gonna end up with a knock on my door. Somebody I don't want to talk to. But like, then you extrapolate that forward. And you have the Obama years. We have Obamacare. We have, even in Trump was trying to do Trump care, right? Back when that first happened. We have the COVID pandemic. And then that, it just feels like the COVID pandemic, Brandon, was the green light that a lot of these folks needed, on both sides, to just increase the spending like drunken sailors. You have some good folks out there like Thomas Massie, who during 2020 is saying, this is bad, don't do this, and being the lone voice. And by the way, that was the first time that Donald Trump decided that Thomas Massie was public enemy number one. So go back and check out Thomas Massie's receipts there, because he's been fighting the good fight for a very long time. And likewise with folks like Rand Paul and the likes. Ron Paul, his dad, they were out there, Justin Amash, fighting the good fight. But then you fast forward to where the Joe Biden administration takes over. They have their Build Back Better, right? You have proposals like the Green New Deal. And then Trump comes into office and we pass the big, beautiful bill, which sounds like it's supposed to be big and beautiful, Brandon, but it also seems like, and it is, adding to our federal debt. So I say all this, right? It's not just the lefties, right? And this is something that I want a lot of my folks and my friends on the right to pay attention to, is that it really comes to us holding our own side accountable. When you have good ideas like George Bush back in 2006, I think it was, talking about the idea of privatizing Social Security, like, okay, maybe that's a good step in the right direction. And I actually would argue it was. If we had gone that route, your Social Security would be vastly more worth more, because it wouldn't be tied to a Ponzi scheme that is enforced by the federal government. So I say all this to say, how do we get our friends on the right to actually stand up, fight the hard fight, not just the good fight, the hard fight, and actually like tell the voters, hey, we're going to have some short-term pain because we need to, because we've gone so far the other direction. It's like the alcoholic, right? You've been drinking and drinking and drinking every single day for 25 years, and it's time to stop drinking. You might go through some alcohol withdrawal symptoms, and it's going to suck, but you're going to feel infinitely better 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years down the road. So how do we get those folks on the right side of the aisle more aware and give them the testicular fortitude needed to actually stand up and fight the good fight?
Yeah, I've always said that politics, when you have somebody who doesn't agree with you and it's an important issue that's crucial to your movement, I've always said that there's a line that you should instantly put through your head, and this is the framework that you should use. It's you're either going to give me your vote or you're going to give me your seat. And this is to say that political pain and praise is very important. That's what I do at Citizens Alliance. We find the bad guys. We kind of beat them up a little bit to let the voters of that district know how they're voting, how they could vote better. And if they don't change their vote, if they don't change their ways, we find a candidate to run against them. We spend money to try and replace them, which is the ultimate form of pain. on the public level. That's the way you're going to do it. I mean, in a republic form of government, you're either going to convince them through kind of brutalizing them. I mean, you can try to convince them through speech. I mean, there's ways to do that, right? I mean, some people are good people that just don't vote, right? I knew them in the legislature. There's a very small few that, if you could just talk to them, they might care. Okay, you might get 3 votes out of the 141 people in our state legislature. All right, great. But how are you going to get the other folks? And the only way that you're going to get the other folks is by rallying around a message and spending political capital and actual dollars to make them scared about what you're proposing. And if they vote against it, them voting for it is a lot better politically than them voting opposed to it, because you're going to make sure that they're going to then know that they voted wrong. That's the way to do it. It's not a glamorous. It's not, it isn't fun to have to do those things. But if you want to get real change, you have to hold these folks accountable. And that's what we do in North Dakota. And I hope that we can, there's other groups that we work with around the country that do similar things, but there's a lot of states around our country and red states, by the way, who just don't have the infrastructure to hold their people accountable. And I think North Dakota is the perfect place to do this, because it's, there's not a lot of money in politics. You can kind of, if you spend $50K, people are like, holy smokes, you spend $50K in Texas, nobody's really batting an eye at it. But North Dakota is kind of the place to really rally the troops and make an example of a liberty state. So I would say that's probably the best way to try and rally the troops is give me your vote or give me your seat.
Let's go to the other side of the aisle, right? Because for every positive we can see, there's also folks who are screaming the negative. And I've really been focusing on this because we've taught here on the show the importance of empathy, not in walking in somebody's shoes and then excusing away any bad behavior, but trying to truly understand how somebody arrived at a conclusion that they have, or some value they believe. But what we've seen over the past few years, and this has really been upticking with the cultural battles as well, is what I call weaponized empathy, where people take empathy and they say, you need to understand that this person has had bad things happening in their life. Therefore, we not only need to excuse any potential bad things they might do, but subsequently, we should be taking resources and allocating it towards these folks to help them because they have faced some inequity, right? Or they've faced some hardships in life. And this leads to the narrative from a lot of folks more on the political left of, you want to cut Medicare spending? That means you want people to die. It's the Elizabeth Warren standing up at, what was it? The FCC rulings back a few years ago. If we look at net neutrality, that means you want people to die. You want to cut Obamacare? You want people to die. This narrative of you do X, which could possibly cut social welfare spendings, therefore you want people to die, has been a tried and true argument from our friends on the left. And unfortunately, Brendan, there's a lot of folks who seemingly buy into that narrative. So in the sales world, we talk about this objection handling, right? And I know for a fact we're going to get hit with these types of objections. We saw it with the narrative around the food stamps, the SNAP benefits, where all of a sudden you have a bunch of folks who are saying, oh, they're not allowing people who are using SNAP benefits to buy whatever they want. That means they want people to starve and die. It's like, and hear me out, we don't want them to go and buy, using taxpayer dollars, horrible foods like sodas and sugary foods and unhealthy foods on the taxpayer dime that are going to make them overtly more unhealthy. And by the way, add to our healthcare costs, which we're also subsidizing. I don't think that that's a good idea. That's not me wanting people to die. That's me addressing a very real issue where our dollars are going and both the negative consequences that we're spending on the back end of it. So how do we deal with some of the weaponized empathy as it comes to different objections? Because unfortunately, these arguments do sell because they're emotionally based. And we know in the world of sales, emotions are what people make their buying decisions on. So how do we address that? And how have you found actual success in doing so up in North Dakota?
Brian, you're identifying a really good question, which is we have a need. The need is to cut spending. The need is to get our government back into shape. But then you're identifying a problem. The problem is that the optics of it are very bad. So it's the age-old question that our Republican Party has faced for the last however many years of trying to find a solution to that question. And my thought is this: We have allowed the left to grow the government on the federal level. I'll start there, certainly on the states too, but the federal government to a point that is completely crazy. And the average person reading, I mean, you remember if you do at the State of the Union, President Trump got up in front of Congress, and he just, I mean, he's a great comedian. Really, in another world, he would just be a stand-up comedian. He gets up on stage and he says, we sent money for transgender, dance theory in another country in South America. We did, and he just like went through the list, and it was hilarious. And if you ask the average American person, do they support our taxpayer money going there? 95% of people, maybe 90, I don't know, there's some crazy people in our society, but the vast majority of people are going to say, yeah, let's cut that. That's easy. Cut that. Non-negotiable, cut that. So I think that the right needs to really prioritize the things that we cut to identify, the number of transactions, and it won't be a huge sum right away, but let's cut out that fat. Maybe you can include a couple other things in that maybe aren't overly popular, just to kind of get the budget into shape. But that's the start to kind of push back against, I would say, the left's social programs, which they have overtly funded and been very successful at it. But then you're going to get into the bigger problem, which is the vast majority of spending. I would say that these liberal programs, they're pretty important. I don't know. I don't have a number off the top of my head, but I'd imagine they're probably 10 to 15% of the spending that we need to cut. And so then what do you do with the other, say, 80, 85%? Well, I think the best way to do that is you have to make a compelling argument. You have to prove it, right? You can't just lie to the American people. I think you have to do everything you can to put those budgets back to the states and essentially get yourself on a diet plan. That's what I'm going to call the federal government's need, is a diet plan. Send those grants. I know you're going to hate to hear it because it's not an immediate fix, but start sending those grants. And you have to have a grand strategy, a long-term strategy. But send grants back to the state to let them figure out what they do with the funds. And then over time, just slowly tick back the spending hedged for inflation. I think that that's probably the best move. You could probably get the American people, because unfortunately we live in a democratic republic where public opinion and optics matter. But that's probably the best way of starting to cut down the fat while still getting American public buy-in, because you're putting it to local control. That local control argument, everybody loves that argument. And if you just say that we're putting federal taxpayers to the most local level, you're going to get people to agree with it. But then you can also start kind of, pulling the rug out underneath of the spending and slowly cutting it. That's how I would do it. And that's how and to a lesser extent, that's how I think that North Dakota should try and cut its spending as well, and other states. But certainly the federal government is kind of what I'm speaking about right now, is give it back to the localities, send it to the states, and then just kind of tap it down as the years go on. And it's not the sexy figure it all out in one administration. But if you want Republicans to ever win again, if you want there to be a president, I don't know, J.D. Vance, name any given whatever, I don't know, Senator Rand Paul, I don't care, Thomas Massey, I don't know. But if you want one of those folks to be in the president's office in 14, 15, 16 years from now, you're going to have to think about those optic battles and have a long-term strategy.
So when's the last time you really thought about your heart health? No, not after just a bad checkup or after seeing a loved one go through something scary, but really thought about it. And the reality is most people don't until it's too late. We chalk it up to fatigue, brain fog, or, just high blood pressure, or hey, maybe we're just getting older, or it's that dreaded stress. But the root cause might be something deeper. Your body's production of nitric oxide dropping off. That one molecule plays a critical role in keeping your arteries open, your blood pressure normal, and your cells oxygenated. And without enough of it, you're not performing at the best mentally or physically. And that's why I've been taking Cardio Miracle for 2 years now. It's a nitric oxide powerhouse packed with over 50 ingredients like organic beetroot, L-arginine, CoQ10, vitamin D3 that are all clinically proven to help support circulation, reduce inflammation, and supercharge your energy levels. It's not just heart support, it's whole body support. So if you're tired of feeling off, give your heart and your health the boost it needs. Just click the link in the show notes or scan that little QR code over my shoulder, or head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS to start your journey today. Discount already applied. Just look for the note, "You're shopping with Brian Nichols" at checkout. One more time, that's cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, and part of what I really try to teach when I'm doing sales consulting and coaching is it's important, obviously, to solve problems. It's important. So there's two things you can accomplish when you're in a sales motion. On one side of it, you have the pain point or problem being solved, right? So I work in the customer experience world, which is all your business communications types of infrastructure, right? So for example, if a credit union, let's just use that as an example. If a credit union has bad CSAT scores, which is customer satisfaction scores, and they change their solution to a more, a newer solution, it improves the flow for the customers. So they feel that they have, a better overarching experience, that we can tangibly see a positive outcome because there is a problem that we are solving, and then it's leading to a positive outcome. Mm-hmm. On the other side of it, it's usually the dollars and cents stuff. It's what we call the ROE, the return on, or ROI, return on investment. So when you look at ROI, that's going to be more of the dollars and cents stuff, the stuff you can say, hey, you were spending $10,000 a month on this solution. You're going to be spending $11,000 a month on this new solution, but you're going to have cost savings of $4,000 a month in, not losing as many customers, so you're not having as much churn, or you're going to have an uptick in sales because you're making it easier for customers to now go ahead and actually order widgets or whatever it may be, or if you're the credit union, to open an account, right? So when we look at the policies that we're talking about here and the solutions that we're trying to bring forth, I personally think it's important for us to, in almost a sequence of events, right? Like say, hey, here's where we're going. If you're a politician, take this blueprint. I think this is effective. Is saying, listen, here's where we're going. Here's the ultimate goal. And here are the different steps, A through Z, that we're going to have to take in order to get there. And on the way to Z, we're going to have tangible wins that we need to show that the public to help them understand that not only are we marching in the right direction, but we need to help them actually realize the positive outcome. And this is where I think government sometimes really has issues in terms of trying to talk to the average person, because it turns into this, highfalutin ivory tower conversation, and it's all like a shell game. Money's going to go here versus money's going to go here, and people just kind of tune out to that. If a politician or an elected official or a policymaker can sit down and actually say, here's the plan, here's what we're aiming towards, and here are the tangible things we're going to be accomplishing throughout that are going to yield either a positive ROI or solving immediate problems, it's on us from a sales motion, more or less, to actually articulate those wins, and to show yes, there might be short-term pain here, but here's what you're getting as a result of this short-term pain. And that's something that is very hard to communicate because we are an instant gratification society, right? So we want to see A plus B equals C now, right? We want to see that immediate happening. So it's difficult if it's a 10-year plan, but if we can start to articulate, hey, here's a win in 3 months, here's a win in a year, here's a win in 3 years, and to show not only that we can accomplish those wins, but then when they actually happen, to document it, to tell the case story, to make people realize these aren't just ideas, these are actually tangible outcomes, that changes the dialogue. Because to your point earlier, a lot of this stuff is 80-20 issues. Right. It's stuff that your average person would look at and be like, yeah, that's goofy. Why are we spending money here? And we need to be able to talk to more of those people. And this is where someone like a Scott Jennings has been such an effective communicator over on CNN, because he's approaching this much through those 80-20 lenses. And RIP Charlie Kirk. This is where Charlie was having a lot of success, boots on the ground, because he was talking to young voters who they're not as programmed into the Leviathan of, well, this is just how government works. This is the way things have always worked, right? It's young folks who are saying, yeah, something's not right, and we really got to start fixing some stuff. And they're open to it because it's the world they're going to have to live in for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So, yeah, man, I think we're in the right, we're heading in the right direction. But I know for a fact, and I know we all experience it, we're gonna get hit with some pushback. So, as we're moving forward, Brandon, give us kind of your blueprint here. What do you see as tangible things from a federal level we can take, and even state levels? It doesn't have to be hyper specific, but more just generalized themes that maybe organizations that are trying to help make actual headway, things they can take and maybe install as success that you saw up in North Dakota.
Sure. Great question. I think that the first thing that you have to always have is, what's the blueprint? You mentioned the blueprint. what is the game plan that you're going to have? You'd be surprised on how many things, like, and again, I live in a fairly small state. Nothing is ever coordinated, and it's so incredibly frustrating. Some of these states, I mean, I think of some of these really good policy institutes who put out policy programs for legislators so that they can hopefully have a identified, unified plan of how they're going to cut spending or how they're going to implement a program or whatever it is. That type of unity, I know it sounds kind of cliche and broad, but that is the first step. Is, believe it or not, you probably should have a plan on how you're going to do it. And you should probably have a pretty good manager on how you're going to pitch it to the public. That's like the first thing. But going forward, you identified the right solution, which is you have to frame things through the 80-20, you call it the 80-20 lens, but through the lenses that are overtly popular. And you have to do everything else kind of behind the scenes. And that's just kind of the name of the game. It sounds shady. It sounds not great, but like, if you want to change things, you have to do certain things publicly and certain things privately. And the people can dig into it if they want. But unfortunately, people just go off of headlines. I've been trying to think of this. When was the last time that, let's say, a president, but you could give it to a governor or whatever, really placed obligations on people and people followed it? And not to say that it's bad that people don't, because think of COVID, right? They've always put obligations on people and people are like, heck no, I'm not doing that. Because there's very little trust. And it's because the public officials have lost their trust. And nobody really wants to believe what the government's saying anymore. I say all this because, from a government standpoint, I was a legislator, and I know a lot of legislators and public officials. It's very difficult to go out on a podium and say, we are going to have to suffer through some cuts. It is what it is. By the way, I want you to vote for me next election. It's just not going to work. Like, you're just not going to, and it's so awful that we live in a system where people are trying to do the right thing and you just like get clobbered for it. But that's the name of the game. So you have to always deliver tangible wins. So, I mean, that's kind of the third element of what I'm saying here is you have to have a blueprint. You have to have somebody to manage the optics. But you have to know how to speak, I would say, charismatically. And really clearly push the wins. I mean, that's kind of the sum of the game plan that I would put the very broad policy, of communicating to the public what you're doing.
Brandon, this has been a really fun conversation. And one of the reasons I really liked our chat today is because this is less like theoretical stuff, and it's more, here's what you can do, right? And this is where I think a lot of folks are jaded in our political process today, is because they just look at how bad things have gotten and they feel hopeless. They feel helpless. And to actually feel you have some semblance of control and you can help not just dictate the outcome, but you can play an integral part in that. That's very empowering. And there's something I always teach in my customer experience sales, where you want the agents, the folks who are actually answering the phones for your customer support, you want them to feel empowered. You want them to feel efficient. But you also want to give them the tools to feel that they can make a difference, right? So the empowerment piece, though, that is the part that a lot of folks in our political process just don't feel today. So I say all this like, understand you can make a difference, right? This is not theoretical. This is not, pie in the sky stuff. This is stuff that Brandon and I, we've seen work. And you mentioned Cliff Maloney back the very first episode I ever did with Cliff back 2019, 2018, somewhere in there. We were talking about Operation Win at the Door back when he was leading Young Americans for Liberty, and how they went and they knocked on, it was like, 60 something thousand doors. It was some insane number out there in I think it was in Pennsylvania when I had him on the show. And that's what works, right? It's the hard work. But it's average people like, you and me going out and making a difference. Scott Pressler going around, and he was instrumental in getting people to actually get involved. And again, I'll bring him up one more time. Charlie Kirk, RIP. Charlie was going out and engaging in a civil, respectful dialogue and challenging perspectives in a polite debate. And he was getting your average college student to start paying attention. And I think what we're realizing in the wake of Charlie's assassination is that it wasn't just young folk that paid attention to Charlie. It was a lot of people across the political spectrum who they heard his arguments. And I've seen a lot of folks who were like, I self-identify as a Democrat, but he was kind of right on X, Y, and Z. And that's all we need, right? Is to be able to get normal people to go back, take a breath, right? Get out of the political back and forth and just try to objectively look at things. And I think through those 80-20 lenses, right? Because there is a lot that we disagree on as a society. I get that. I think everybody listening understands that. It's a very real problem. But man, there's a lot we agree on. There's a lot of common sense that will actually save the day. It's to teach people how to think, not to teach them what to think. It's going out and engaging in respectful dialogue with people you can actually move the needle with. I call this our ICP, or in this case, our IVP, ideal customer persona, or ideal voter persona, right? Not everybody is persuadable. Therefore, don't waste your time. Like, I've given up, Brandon, on trying to convince goofballs. I don't spend my time going after goofballs. I don't try to, go ahead and, give them the best, most logically reasoned argument. I understand that goofballs, guess what? They're goofy, and they're not going to pay attention to the things that the facts and figures, right? They are entirely embracing a narrative based on emotion, based on feelings, based on vibes. And it's on us to not waste our time going after folks like that and actually investing our time, energy, and efforts persuading the persuadable, and what we always say here on the show. And I know people are just like, oh, pull the string on Brian's back. He'll say his catchphrase, meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's what wins, right? Both the world of politics and the world of sales, in the world of life. So that's my final thoughts. Brandon, bring us home. What do you want folks to take away from today's conversation? And obviously any calls to action for the audience today?
100%. Thank you so much for that opportunity. I think the big thing is that DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, very important. I'm very, very happy to support it. And I think it's been implemented, obviously, on the federal government level as well as on 20 state government levels. But we need to have good people serving on those committees. You want to do something about it, you should find out who's in charge of legislative management in your state, figure out how the appointments happen for those spots. By the way, oftentimes there's a general public can be put on those committees as well. So apply for those spots and put some pressure on if it's the governor or the legislative management who appoints that. So we have good people looking for trying to make government more efficient. You mentioned Charlie, you mentioned getting involved. If you want to honor Charlie Kirk, if you are heartbroken about what happened last week, run for office. You can't run for office, help somebody run for office. That's the call to action. It's not hard to do. It's not easy to do, but it's people I think sometimes put it up as impossible. It's not. Run for office. You just have to I had 13 people that I knew in my district when I ran. 13. And I ended up getting, a couple thousand votes. It's possible to do. You just have to just dig in and have a good strategy. So you want to honor Charlie Kirk. You want to fix the government. Run for office if you can't. Figure out a way to help the person that is good and in running in your legislative district or for a statewide race or for Congress. Figure it out. It's doable.
There you go, folks. Well, we'll include all the links to go ahead and follow Brandon over in our show notes. So please go ahead, give those a look. And by the way, folks, if you got some value from today's conversation, do me a favor. Go ahead and give it a share. When you do, tag yours truly at B Nichols Liberty on Instagram, X, and Facebook. And as for the Brian Nichols Show, you can watch the Brian Nichols Show or listen to the Brian Nichols Show wherever you would like. That means over on your favorite audio platforms like Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, wherever it may be. I like Podcast Addict. Head over to the Brian Nichols Show, hit subscribe, and we have over 1,000 episodes. So you gotta go ahead and check out some of those past conversations, like with Cliff Maloney back in whenever. Just go ahead and search his name in the show episodes. You'll find him at some point. Or head over to your favorite video platforms like YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, or X. We upload the video version of the show in its entirety over on those respective platforms. And by the way, we do live stream the Brian Nichols Show every Monday, Thursday, and Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern over on those same platforms. So please do me a favor, make sure you've hit subscribe and hit that little notification bell because we don't want you to miss a single episode that goes live. And if you are joining us here on one of those platforms, head down below into the comments. Let us know your thoughts. Obviously, if you think we are completely off base, well, let us know. We'll go ahead and we'll make sure we read those on the next episode. With that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Brandon Prichard. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.